I wonder if I'll know how to use my clicker. Hello. So if you're here for this talk, then you're in the right place, and that's really good. And if you're not here for this talk, you have to hurry, because I'm going to be here for like the next 30 odd minutes, and you're going to be trapped in here with me. Okay. Okay. Ooh. Where do I point this? Let's find out. Is it this button? Is it this button? Oh, it's that button. So this talk is going to be really silly and lighthearted and not nearly as educational as it sounds, probably. It's going to have a lot of personal anecdotes and asides and tangents and things, because that's just how my brain operates, and that's great, and we like that. But there's obviously like a dark side to the way that kids use the internet. And I guess I want you to be aware of that. I had unfettered internet access starting from like age 8. And that probably wasn't a good thing, objectively. So anything I was exposed to, kids using the internet today are definitely exposed to. And whatever we try to censor, the kids have probably already seen. And I don't know, they've probably seen worse, actually, right? So I have some ideas for ways you mitigate this that we'll try to touch on, but I don't actually have any solutions, okay? Okay. Okay. They're all trapped with us. Security, lock the doors. So hi, that's me. Does this have a laser pointer? Yes. Ooh. I'm Zelle Marcovicci. That's how you say that. It's really, really hard to describe who I am and what I do, but I'm going to try to do that now. So I really, really love technology in a lot of ways. I have a lot of gadgets. Some of them I even use. There's 3 computers in my house right now that are running 3 different flavors of Linux. I get a lot of pleasure just from kind of tinkering with things and figuring out how they work and pulling their guts out and breaking them. And I don't know, rigid structure is kind of a blessing and a curse for me. Like, on one hand, I do like a good instruction booklet, you know? But I'm also a real advocate for self-determination. I'm really interested in Montessori-style teaching, where it's really self-directed. I think probably modern society is like a garbage fire, and if it was dismantled, someone smarter than me could build something out of the wreckage. That could be really great. And I would probably like try to befriend that much smarter person, because I'm so disgustingly outgoing. Like, I was just out with a friend and she actually did the like, I can't take you anywhere thing, because a couple walked by and I complimented their clothes, and then we were chatting, and then we were exchanging phone numbers, you know? Like, I like to talk to strangers on the bus or on planes. At the grocery store. And I try really, really, really hard to notice when they absolutely don't want me to talk to them anymore. So I'm sorry, introverts. I've given some previous talks. That's not a huge surprise, because I like to talk. This one was 3 years ago at this little conference called NZGDC. You might have heard of it. It was called How to Fix Everything. It wasn't about that. It was about like my rapid falling, not even falling, it was like a failing upwards strategy, and how I kind of entered, quote unquote, the industry and academia while I was also like a total mess. At one point I was like, instead of giving 100% to your job, give 60%. And everybody really loved that, or they hated it. There were a bunch of startup guys, and they really hated it. I'm really sorry, startup guys. Then last year at a different conference called Play by Play, that you may or may not have heard of because it's smaller, I gave this one, which was a lot of fun. It was called Weird Ways We Play. Ostensibly, it was about, like, I don't know, the aberrant readings of games and how do we play games that we weren't intended to. It was mostly about Neopets and the Neopets black market, because that's something I'm really into. I'm also a game developer, I guess. That's a thing. I made a couple of educational games for this thing called the Wild Base Recovery Center in Palmerston North. This one's a day in the life of a Kiwi Ranger. There's a Kiwi. The vets required us to make a possibility of a dead Kiwi, so I had to I designed this little sort of, detective minigame. What killed the Kiwi? It was a stoat. It's always a stoat or a cat. This one was called Diagnose Me, which is just like such a delightful name as well. It was also for the vets, as you can see. There's Slurp. Yeah. So right now I'm working on a different educational game. It's about this early conservationist here in Aotearoa called Richard Henry. You may or may not have heard of him. Has anybody heard of Richard Henry? He was cool. He was really into trying to rescue kakapo before we realized that was going to be such a big problem. But like fistfuls of kakapo rolling all over the place, and he was chucking them in his boat and everything was going wrong. So we're making a game about that. I'm quite interested in educational games and how they work. And I mean, I'm just interested in education in general. I was a self-taught programmer, and I kind of had to learn a lot about how to learn before I could learn. So right now I have so many jobs. I'm a head mentor at Too Hood at Tech, which is like this charity that runs these hands-on free technology workshops for kids throughout the Wellington region. They're really great. Free classes for kids. We love that. And then also sometimes I teach at Massey University. Not free, very expensive. Expensive courses for adults. We love that also. These are actually like commercials I've been in. I'm kind of part of the furniture now. So I just went back to start my master's, and it's taking up my whole life and my whole brain and my whole income, and I would really love to chat with you about it if you bother me after the talk. Please, let me talk to you about my master's. That's enough of that. I have the tendency to meander. I'm going to do my best to be really, really aware of the time. I'm going to be signaled by those lovely people back there. I've got a timer running on my phone. I've got to have some sort of rough script and structure. It'll still run over time. That's okay. You can just walk out while I'm talking and start eating food. I forgive you. We're right about here. So now that I've kind of introduced myself, I'm going to start meandering through my own history with online games as a kid. And I'm going to talk more broadly and perhaps slightly too authoritatively about how kids play games. And I have a bunch to say about communication and socializations and kind of the social structures that kids build with each other. I wish I had like a 10-hour talk for that. And I'll also talk about some different types of game mechanics, some of which I see as positive, some of which cost you money, not so positive. But like, you know, it's not a dire talk. This is like a fixable situation, maybe, probably. And then I try to end on a high note, so I will do my very best to end on that here. I promise. So my own personal journey with video games, which began in the 90s, started with like these single-player games, which I went to for all sorts of things. I was really into this exploration aspect and this storytelling aspect, which is absolutely not illustrated here, but this game definitely had a lot of that, trust me. And imagination play that wasn't rigidly defined by the game itself. The non-digital forms of play that these were mimicking were things like climbing trees or reading stories and acting out stories with little toys and pretending I was a fish guy being menaced by crabs. I could talk so much about that game on the right. I'm really holding myself back. I'm sorry. So these were games that I loved, but I wasn't being myself in them, right? I was being Banjo from Banjo-Kazooie or Lyn from Fire Emblem or a fish guy from Seventh Cross Evolution. And then when I was like 8 or 9, I got into StarCraft, which is a really cool game that looks like a whole lot of nothing to the modern eye once I put it on a tiny little still screenshot, but that's okay. It's this real-time strategy, so you're controlling all these little armies of guys. It had a really cool story, and it had aliens, and it had swearing, and I was really, really excited about it. And also it had the first online play I ever saw. So there was this little thing which has been repurposed, but it was called Battle.net by Blizzard. You probably have heard of that. And they integrated it directly with StarCraft and with Diablo, their other really big game. And it just connected you to, like, it was these little IRC-style chats with other players, and then you could go play StarCraft with them. And I have a really dark confession. It's not that dark. I had 2 boyfriends on Battle.net. And they did not know about each other. And they also did not know that I was 9 years old. Because I was really articulate and good at spelling, and I said I was 19, and somehow that worked for me. My username was Chowgirl. I was named after the virtual pets from Sonic Adventure, so if those 2 guys are out there somewhere, call me. Please don't. Okay, we can't linger on all this too long, I'm so sorry. But look, StarCraft was kind of my gateway into other MMOs, right? Massively multiplayer online games. And some of these had graphics, like that's a graphic. And some of these did not have graphics, that is not a graphic. And then this didn't have gameplay. This thing in the middle, this is just a chat room basically, and you can also walk around. But look, they were all multiplayer and wonderful, and this is the kind of thing I'm really broadly going to be talking about when I talk about online games or digital communities or whatever. This is the stuff. I'm mostly going to be talking about this topic from a heuristic point of view, which is one of those words that becomes normal because you're in academia and doesn't mean anything to most people. But what I mean is that I'm talking about my own experiences and experiences I've witnessed. This is not a really scientific talk. But this is a science, and if you want to take a more direct approach at researching games in childhood, especially like the 90s era, there's this really wonderful book called Hanging Out, Messing Around, and Geeking Out. It looks like that. And it's like a collection of ethnography studies. It's from 2009, so it could be a little out of date, but not that out of date. It's still really salient. And if anything I'm saying is even slightly interesting, you should go find it. It's super easy to find. It's at libraries. I will send you the PDF if you contact me afterwards. They probably wouldn't even mind. And one super cool thing about how kids play with each other that I did want to highlight, which is universal, definitely still true today, is that it's not really about the games a lot of the time. The games are just a platform to talk with each other or hang out. This book talks a lot about this, but this example is when I was little and I didn't have the internet yet. I had Kirby Air Ride, and we would, boot up multiplayer mode, and you're meant to be racing each other and fighting each other. And we would just, ride around and talk and basically, again, do imagination play where, all the Kirbys had little backstories and stuff. And children are sort of the experts at play. So it's not a surprise to me that they're the experts at meta-narrative, which is a term you guys have probably heard a lot already, but it's the story of how you play a game, right? It's not the story from the game. It's your experience playing it. Kids are good at it. This is kind of bringing me into communication, and I'm going to be really, really broad with what communication means. You could get broader. It could be a whole talk. But let's say I'm talking about voice and text and gestures. And I have this kind of imaginary meter in my mind, which I'm trying to make visible when I talk about sort of freedom of expression in online communities. And I'm going to call that the Wild West-o-meter, because I think it's funny. But also, okay, look, if there's no restrictions on how you speak, like over here, that's the Wild West, right? It's lawless. That's what I mean. Okay. So you've got total Wild West, and you can say anything. There's no censorship. There's basically no online games that operate like this. There's usually some kind of moderation, right? But, it happens. A lot of games, I showed World of Warcraft earlier, there's probably sitting in this little orange block where, maybe the most heinous racial slurs are censored, but, mostly it's a free-for-all. And then on the green side here, you have total safety, which is no communication, not at all. That's the only way to be safe, in my opinion. And that's not as easy as not having a chat feature, right? Because there's this pesky other word up there. But we'll get to that a little bit. So what's a good example of sort of in this area, starting to edge over towards the Wild West, but still pretty safe? Maybe just a step or two from that totally green section. What if you have a predetermined list of things to say, right? So this is Disney's ToonTown Online. Again, I could give a whole talk on this. Let's not get into it. But this is their speed chat system, right? Where you get to select from little categories of things like emotions. And maybe emotions will say I'm sad. And then you could select that and your character would say it. So a lot of games from the 90s and early 2000s that were aimed at kids had some sort of feature like this. It was considered kind of the way to do it, right? And then if you're a paid member of ToonTown, you can also use the regular chat, it's another square over. And the reason it's only another square over is because it's a whitelist system. So what I mean is that when this person types in, I hope, God only knows what they were going to type there, these words have been manually entered by somebody into their database. And it's okay, these are words that are okay and you're allowed to say them. And if you say anything that isn't there, it'll light up red. When you try to say it, it won't be included in your message. So that's great. Then you can't swear, right? You can totally still swear because you know what, kids are imaginative and determined, and that's wonderful. So if you go another square over, okay, the whitelist system, it's quite restrictive, and somebody's got to be manually entering in all those words, and it doesn't stop you from swearing anyway. So maybe a blacklist, right? This is an example of a blacklist. You can say anything you want unless it's on, again, a manually input list, and that's where you put your heinous slurs and your swears and things. You can't say rectum in Club Penguin. This is not really a surprise. I don't know. But not every bad word will be caught, okay? But it's a good system, right? Except sometimes normal words contain swears, right? So if you try to edit your Neopets page to include the word basement, then you just learned a brand new swear, because that contains the letters that spell semen. So that can be a problem. And look, of course, even if you can't swear, you can still be really rude, right? I did ethnography, sort of. I play Animal Jam. It's not an ethnography. And here's an example of a cartoon cat named Glowing Jelly Tom, and they're calling somebody a spoiled brat. So maybe text chat is a mistake in general, or maybe things need some form of moderation. I kind of lean towards that. I'm pro-moderation. And this is an example of a game that I think is maybe in the Wild West formatting right now, which is crazy, right? This is VR chat. We may have heard of it. We know and love it, perhaps. And up until recently, it didn't even have a text chat, but it had voice chat the whole time. And my understanding is that it is effectively unmoderated. And even if you walk into public rooms on VR chat, not private or anything, you can just wander in, you will hear really young children saying really disturbing things to each other. And the hand tracking is so good that they're also flipping each other off now, which is great because it brings me right to gestures. So this is Minecraft Steve, that's his name. He's crouching. This is a thing you can do in Minecraft. It's a game mechanic. Does anybody here innately understand what is being communicated here? Yeah, I see some hands. Great. So this is a really common thing. People will say hi. Like, in Minecraft, they'll just crouch and uncrouch. It's way quicker than opening up a chat window to type, but it acknowledges that, like, I saw you, and I'm going like, you know? It's great. And that's really, really different from what's happening on the left in Halo. So does anybody recognize this one? Yeah, there's some nods. So that's teabagging. It's when you killed somebody, and the way you decide to communicate your excitement about the victory is you get on top of the enemy and there's a lot of ways to communicate in games, even non-verbally. And this sort of stuff, if this becomes the common parlance of your game, how do you get rid of that? You can't just remove crouching. Crouching is an actual game mechanic, right? Like, what happens here? This is the stuff I'm really obsessed with, this idea that you've included a mechanic, and it's a core mechanic, and somebody's abusing it in this weird way. And I love this part of the talk because I get to talk a little bit more about Neopets, and if I would wish this was my full-time job, I wish I could just circumnavigate the globe and give these insane talks about Neopets. So this section is lifted from part of my much longer talk that was mostly about Neopets. But it fits, okay? Just let me have this. So Neopets, it's a virtual pet website. You get a little guy. This is my guy. It's called a Vandagire or something. They're kind of recent, but I like him. He's a little owl, right? And then you try to do things to change and build up your little guy, and like, do you level it up, and do you read it books, and you train it, and you can turn it into other species of pets. This one's like 23 years old, so that's really messed up. And then this species of pet's called an uni. I mean, look, let's be really real. I'm wrong. It's probably called a uni, like a unicorn, right? But I'm too old to change, so it's an uni. This one's green. And an item you can use to turn your pet into a green uni is a green uni morphing potion, which is that thing. Okay, does this all make sense? So, due to the way they did economics in this game, which is really crazy, that's also a whole talk, I can't get into that. But for years, the green uni morphing potion was just like the cheapest one available for whatever reason. It was just the easiest one to get. And so some madman had this idea like, what if I just start adopting pets from the virtual pound and turning them into green unis and then putting them back, right? And this became kind of like a thing. And like some of the high profile people doing it were calling themselves the Green Uni Project. And it was like this avant-garde art project for children, by children, very upsetting to children. They really hated it. I did this. I had a whole list of pets I turned into green unis, and I struck terror into the hearts of other children. So that's some aberrant gameplay. How do you stop that? You kind of don't. But look, I can talk about Neopets all day. I had my last talk, and it's on my website, and you can see that at the end of the talk, and please watch it. Talk to me about Neopets, add me about Neopets. You'll know more than you ever wanted to know. That's great. So the key to a lot of this, let's move on, is that these things are not happening in social isolation, right? They're happening in groups. Kids love groups. They love to make friends and guilds and clubs and add a bunch of people to it. And you're like, what do you mean my 8-year-old has 700 friends? That doesn't make sense to me. But they do. They really do. And, even if I get into talking about gameplay, I think it's important to contextualize particular types of gameplay that are really social. So these 3 games, they've got mechanics that work just as well single player, right? So like we've got Subway Surfer and you're running around and you're collecting coins. We've got Dead Cells and you're like swooping through enemies and then hitting them. And we've got Minecraft parkour, you can do that. But some mechanics are more compelling in multiplayer games. Like, what about games that let you build up a base? And you can do that single player, but isn't the whole point that your base looks cool and other people are going to see it? And games where you level up and self-improve are everywhere, but they're really meaningful when your level is being compared to somebody else's level, and the things you can do are being compared to the things they can do. And this whole idea of like loot games that give you cool rare items to find, like it's not just about finding the rare item in isolation, it's about like you have the item and other people don't, and you're interacting with each other. And a lot of this for me is really related to the ways that we build up ourselves in games, not just bases. Like maybe you're chasing leaderboards or like you're making cool virtual clothes to appear on your avatar or whatever. These are things that aren't happening in isolations. We're community oriented, we're social animals. And this is also where you start getting into the really dark stuff, like monetization. And I have 2 forms of monetization here. And to be honest with you, I think one of them's a lot worse. But it could be my biases, right? But on the right here, we've got like the subscription system, which was really common when I was a kid. Yes, you're locked into paying however much to be a member of ToonTown, but like that's now your hard cap of money you spent on this game, right? You can't spend more than $5 a month on ToonTown. That could never fly in today's economy. And then here, like we've got this Robux thing, and it's a microtransaction. But I mean, can we acknowledge this is not a microtransaction? This is $200 for an amount of Robux. That's a macro transaction. That's a ton of money. What is that? Like, okay, so I started playing on this Minecraft server this year called Manicube, and it wasn't meant to be an ethnography, but then it kind of was an ethnography. Because it's just like a server that somebody runs, and a bunch of kids are on it, and it's got extra features and gameplay modes and stuff. Like if you want to just do parkour, you can do that. If you want to just build your base, you can do that. But there's also like this weird gambling subculture. There's this coin flip game you can do, and when you do the coin flip game, somebody else does it with you, and whoever wins gets all of the money. And this isn't virtual money. This can also be real money. And like, look, the longer I played, the more I noticed that coin flips were really consuming a lot of the kids on here, and I didn't go through like a formal interview process with these children, but some really disturbing stuff was coming up as we just chatted organically. And okay, does everybody know what a whale is in this context? Like, you're blowing a lot of money on gambling or microtransactions, but there's actually a leaderboard on Manicube for how much real-life money you've spent on the game in this current season, which is a couple of months. And I just checked yesterday to make sure I get up-to-date stats on this, and the leaderboard currently #1 in the past couple of months, somebody has spent $6,000, not on Minecraft, on the Minecraft server. For what? Like coin flips and cool hats. So this sort of casual spending is becoming really common in games, and I obviously think it's not super great. So there's a term you've probably heard, which is gacha games, and that's from gachapon, as in like those little machines where you turn the thing, and it's a crank, and a little ball drops, and there's something in the ball, and you're excited. So all of these gacha games will have different actual gameplay mechanics. Like this one is Genshin Impact. It has a whole thing you're like running around and jumping and attacking and stuff, but they all have this kind of draw mechanic where maybe you're recruiting characters or pulling loot, and then sometimes you get really rare ones, and that's really exciting. It's making all of these lights and noises, and it's like a slot machine. Literally, it acts like a slot machine. And a lot of the games don't even tell you like what your chances are of getting the thing. So you have no idea. You may never see the thing. And then other games do give you the chances of seeing the thing, and sometimes that's worse, which is really interesting. This one's Cookie Run Kingdom, and what's really funny to me is like, this is really dire, right? This is a 0.034% chance of getting whatever this is. And a bunch of kids moved from Genshin Impact to Cookie Run Kingdom because this system where they could see that miserable percentage was more fair. And that's really messed up. Like, where are they even getting the money? Is somebody giving their 8-year-old a credit card? I'm very scared. I want to stop talking about gambling because it makes me sad. I want to pivot wildly into talking about edutainment for like the remainder of this talk. I hope that's okay. Are we okay with that? Okay, great. Did anybody else play Reader Rabbit? Yeah, I see some hands. I loved Reader Rabbit. I think I was like the perfect target audience because I genuinely just enjoyed the experience of learning things. And I know that's not everybody's bag. Other people might need an extrinsic motivation, right? And I think edutainment games get a really bad rap in general because some kids don't want to learn just for the sake of learning. But there's actually a context where basically all kids kind of love edutainment games, and that's that they love being smarter than other kids and getting to show off their knowledge. So this is Best Guess, which is a quiz minigame from Animal Jam, and it throws like an animal fact on the screen, and then you either move, left or right if you think it's true or false, and it's meant to be really quick, hence the name, but like everybody in chat starts shouting justifications at each other. Like the fact will be like, horses can't throw up. And then like you'll get an 8-year-old, frantically keyboard mashing like, true, I know all about horses, I have a pet horse. And they might sway more people to their side, And that's kind of exciting and powerful. Kids really like knowing things. They just want to know things for a reason. This is where I think a lot of learning can kind of leverage this educational approach called just-in-time learning, which you might have heard before. And it's a framework where you learn the skills you need just in time to accomplish a goal. So this Minecraft screenshot, like perhaps a kid was like, okay, my goal is I want to make these lights flicker on and off. And then they have to figure out like, okay, well, how do you make something move back and forth? Well, a piston moves back and forth. And then how do you connect that to this? And then how do you connect that to this lever and make it so that it does it on a particular timer? And they may or may not have any idea that they've actually just learned logic gates and that this is low-level computing. I really like when games are able to kind of, to give you skills that are then real-world skills. You're not just getting better at playing the game, but there's some sort of transferable thing. Like, it's really cool that Roblox uses a form of Lua. That's a real programming language. You've probably heard of that. Like, kids are going to be learning Lua to make stuff in Roblox, even if they, you know, the monetization is predatory or whatever. It's not all dire. And like, art is also knowledge. Like, I don't want to discount how many kids are making art because of video games. I think that's a really incredible part of it. And like, I can complain about the vibe on VR chat all I want, but it's really cool that there's a bunch of kids who are like learning texturing and modeling so that they can make their cool avatars. Like, what is that? That's amazing. Great. Deep breaths. I don't have the answer to this question. I'm really sorry. But the thing that I keep coming back to is that right now all of our mitigations seem to be about forcing kids like off of social media or forcing them to play less games or like, you know, just trying ways to remove the community. And I think what's missing is this idea of stewardship, right? Where in so many other areas of our lives, we're modeling the things we want kids to do. And so this is a stock photo, I'm sorry. I mostly avoided using stock photos, but this is where I broke down. I just want to say here that there's actually a really high value in playing games with your kids. And even when you can't like bring yourself to actually do that, or there are other concerns, or you're just too busy, letting them invite you into their virtual worlds, like, you know, whatever, sign up on Neopets with them if you can, but also just like when they're explaining to you what's happening in Roblox or Minecraft today, like actually listen and try to understand the mechanics, but also try to understand the important part, which is probably the social stuff or the accomplishment they feel or the things they're learning. If you can play anything with them, that not only means you're actually supervising them, which is cool, but like if somebody else is crappy online, or even if the game is just frustrating, suddenly you're modeling how they can react to that. And that's really cool. And if you make sure that you're somebody that they can tell about what they did in the computer today, then they're actually going to tell you when something bad happens. So I've taught a lot of kids. I've taught so many children and young adults over the past couple of years. And yes, look, they are nervous and stressed, and they play slightly too many gambling games, and they are finding novel ways to swear at each other, and they're navigating this world we can't imagine. And yes, everything is on fire, and they don't know how to cope with it. But consider, they are also amazing. They are realistic, they are political, they are looking out for each other, they are creative, they are incredibly smart, they are compassionate, they are extraordinarily aware of their needs, their boundaries, their biases. Even with a good pep talk, they're aware of their strengths. So we are, in fact, leaving them with a pretty messed up world, but I hope that we're also leaving them with the tools to fix it. Thanks. If you want to check out any of my previous talks, this is the place to do it. This is the nerd social media that I use. You can find me there. There was going to be another website link here, but because I touched so many computers, it's actually broken. I haven't fixed it in time, so thank you very much. I might have time for like a single question if anybody does have a burning. Otherwise, just ambush me at lunch, please. You know, like I'll be here. Thank you.